In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up Exclaimer autoresponder in minutes. Autoresponder is our Exchange auto reply tool for, of course, Exchange auto responses. Of course, we can also do message redirection, so you could change the recipient of a message. We could also change the sender address for the same reason. You could, if you're transitioning from one domain to another, you could change the sender's domain after they send the message. And we can also add recipients to an email. So you could secretly BCC someone on a message if you wanted to keep tabs on a new employee's email during their probationary period. And we can add an ethical wall policy to block email between different parts of an organization if you're required to for legal reasons. So I'm going to show you how to set up Exclaimer autoresponder. We're going to install it. We're going to go through the first use wizard and set up our first auto reply. I'm going to edit the template so it contains the information I want it to and the attachment I want it to, and then I'll test it to make sure that it's working. Let's get started. First of all, we'll just download autoresponder. That's a pretty straightforward process. I'll just enter my details and click download. Now I'll click save, and then once the file downloads, I'll click run, and yes. So I'll click setup. And I'll just close this web page behind. And now when I click next, I'll just accept the terms in the license agreement and click next again. And next to install it in the default location, program files, and install to begin the installation. So now it's just going to go through the installation. This progress bar is going to let me know that it is indeed installing the software. When that's done, I'll click finish, and it's going to launch the autoresponder console. Now the first thing it's going to do is ask me whether I want to register for a 30-day trial, or I can activate the full license if I already have my product key, or I can just click continue. So first I'll click next, and now in here it's going to let me choose the scenario I want to set up. First of all, I could have an automated reply, maybe to a sales inquiry, or maybe to a job application. Then maybe I could have a message redirection. So if an email comes in to an old domain, it could be redirected to a new domain. Or you could modify the sender address to let them use a different domain, or I could automatically blind copy in someone. For example, the manager of a new employee, so that during their probationary period we can see what messages they're sending. We could also set up an ethical walls policy so that certain users in the organization can't send emails to different parts of the organization. Lastly, you could choose advanced and just set up the unique user case you have, but I'll just choose automatic reply to show you really around the software and click next. I'll just enter a name for my policy here. Great. And I'll just choose a template. Now I'm going to choose one of the standard templates to begin with, and I'll get the chance to edit it later. We've got the sales auto reply, we've got the job application reply, whatever. Now in here I can set rules. So what I could do is specify that it's going to maybe apply when any message comes in. Maybe if the sender is someone specifically, if they're inside or outside the organization. Maybe I could, I don't know, choose a certain AD group or domain or organizational unit. Same thing maybe with recipient, and I could also base rules on subject, body, message headers. I could also go in and use those same attributes I used on sender on recipient here. But instead here what I'm going to do is I'm going to call out that they have specific character sequences in their address. Like maybe if there's a domain I had to watch out for. But in my case, it's the sales at address I need to look out for, which can either come into my net systems or tapestry design domains. And I can decide whether to expand distribution lists or split the message recipients before checking rules, so that effectively if you email an external contact and copy in your colleague won't also trigger off the email. It'll just apply to that external contact. So that's all in order. I'll click next. I could set a date range. So I could say, look, I only want this to apply during a certain time period. Maybe the 3rd of November until the 3rd of December, for example. I'll go to continuous and click next. I could also decide on who the recipient of the message is going to be. Maybe it could be a different email address. It doesn't actually have to be an auto reply. It could go off to someone new. Or alternatively, if we just go back to that, we can decide the sender. So we could change the sender of the message. So rather than it being the original recipient, it could be maybe someone different. Robert Aaron if I wanted. Let's go with original, and I'll click next. I can decide on what I want the subject to be. So I could say, look, use the original subject, but put this text before it. Or I could just say use the original on its own, or replace the original subject with the one I typed there. Let's click next. And if I want to add any attachments to the automatic reply, So I've got a little sales brochure that the guys need me to stick on there. So I'll just go here, sales brochure PDF, open, and perfect. So I'll click next. Now that's all set up. I can click finish. But there are a couple extra tweaks that I can make in the full console. So for example, in the template here, what I want to just do is actually use the text that marketing gave me to put in this auto reply. So I'll click edit template. I'll just grab the text they gave me and we'll paste that into autoresponder. And you know what? I can decide on font and formatting here. So I'm going to go with, let's go with say Arial, and we'll just make it a little bit smaller. Excellent. I can also, if I want, by the way, put in fields for contact details. Put in maybe, I don't know, say the message recipients, display name, telephone numbers, mobile, fax. Same thing with the sender, or maybe even details from the message itself. So I could put in maybe the subject or other content. I could put in dynamic content, like maybe an RSS feed or rotating banner ad, or maybe some custom image or even some social media content. Lastly, I could even, if I want, put in a conditional field. So it automatically hides that field or replaces it if there's no data to go in there and there's maybe data in another field. So I'll click save and yes to confirm that. I can also set some exceptions on here. So I can say maybe that I'll exclude certain emails if they meet certain criteria. I could decide on the hierarchy of policies, maybe if one policy is applied, don't process any more autoresponder policies. I've got those options and conditions I showed you earlier. And also if I want, I can decide that we're only going to auto reply after a certain period of time has elapsed. Or maybe they'll only reply once in a certain period of time. So for example, I can specify here just once every 24 hours. And I can delay delivery. So I can say only send that auto reply maybe 60 minutes after the message was received, or only at a certain time of day. I've got that control if I need it. Now I can also decide to make changes maybe to the original message. In here, I can modify the sender, the address. I could change maybe the sender's email domain to a different domain. That's actually where we would use those rules to change the sender domain that we saw earlier, or maybe redirect to a new domain. I could change the sender's email address to a specific email address if I wanted, and display name. And here's also maybe where I could automatically blind copy someone in, like maybe if I wanted to blind copy in the boss to make sure that he can keep track of what's going on. Or I could abort delivery to create that ethical wall policy we saw earlier to block messages between certain groups. Now, let's click save on that. And you know what? I want to go into Internet Explorer and I'll just send a little test email. So I'll go to my Outlook.com account, type in my details, just send a test message in here, address, subject, body of course, and we'll click send. That automated reply I had created. Let's see here. Perfect. Sales auto reply, test one. I've also got the sender address we wanted. We've got the message that marketing told me to include, the attachment I wanted included. Perfect. It's all worked exactly as I intended. Thanks for watching. That's Exclaimer Autoresponder.